This meeting come to order. Today is Tuesday, February 14, 2017. This is a special study session for the Prescott City Council. Welcome, everybody. Roll call.
Mayor Oberg.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Yes.
Councilman Lozelle.
Here.
Councilwoman Orr.
Here.
Councilman Shiska.
Here.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
All present.
Looks like we got 4 items on the agenda today. Looks like B, talking about a street project on Goodwin and a legislative update. I'll take any questions from the audience or comments from the audience. The other 2 look like they're basically for us to be able to work on trying to just get a understanding of the issue. Go ahead and start with the first one.
Item A, presentation by Public Works on the mid-year status of the fiscal year 17 capital improvement program.
Thanks, Dana. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk, Henry Hash, Public Works. It's a bit past mid-year fiscal year, and we thought it would be a good time to come before you to give you an update of what we have been doing in the first part of the year, where are we with our CIP projects, and other items that you have directed us to do. And Mr. Steve Oroz is there to give a fairly detailed presentation on that one. We also have today, we have a Goodwin project. It's a downtown project. It's important. I know it's important for you. We are at the very early stages of our design, and it's a good time for any comments and changes. So we have our consultant, Huskin Ryan, going to give us a presentation. But before we go there, I would like, with your permission, to give you kind of a 30,000 foot of the picture we have in our assets. And I start in no particular order here. We start with our roads. We have over 600 miles of lane roads in various condition. Other road-related issues, we have drainage, water quality, traffic, safety, and many things of that nature. The current need or the backlog for our roads is $74 million. We brought this to you when we made the presentation back in September 2014. Voters approved the extension of our 1 cent road tax in August of 2015, and we are really grateful for that support. And we'll show you what we have done with the money. I just want to say that if the 1 cent road tax did not get extended, and it would go back to 0.75 cents, we go from a $74 million backlog to about a $100 million backlog in about 10 years. But fortunately, they understood and the measure was passed. Our backlog will still go up, but not necessarily at the same pace. In the areas of water and wastewater, we have the approximate total asset of $850 million to $1 billion. That's pretty impressive with the numbers. Most of the work we do in water area is frankly dealing with emergencies, the areas that we believe is going to fail in the near future. Most of the work we do in wastewater area is very similar to what we do in water, just putting fires out. And also because we are ordered by ADEQ or QE to do certain projects in a certain time, which cost us many millions of dollars. So you ask, why is it this way? It is because we have the most complicated utility system in the state of Arizona. It's because we didn't plan for the future, and we have always lacked funding for a replacement program. This is not unique to Prescott. It's a nationwide problem. Out of sight, out of mind. So today, here in Prescott, and most other places in the nation, we have aging infrastructure that is starting to fail at a more rapid pace. That's why it's really important to think about a replacement program. About 2 years ago, I came before you and we talked about a replacement program. The council was very pleased and receptive, and for the fact that we are talking about future planning. Your direction to me was, come back when you're ready, when you have the numbers to talk more details. We now have the numbers. In the last 2 years, our staff's been working diligently, going through plans, inventory, everything to come up with the numbers. So in the near future, we will come back to you with presentation for your view, comment, and direction on the replacement program. And that would be for a 50-year program, a 60 or a 65, depending how much we can afford. All I know it's going to be very, very expensive, and currently the funding isn't available. We have to talk about that. The last area in public works I want to talk about in our solid waste have been some lack of maintenance. So there are many projects and purchases yet to be completed in order for our transfer station to really continue the most efficient customer service and competitive service that we have been providing to our customers. So to run a business, to run a city is expensive. We haven't done, frankly, a good job in the past. It's about time to think about that. With that, I would like to ask Mr. Steve Oros to come with his presentation.
Thanks, Henry. All right, now for some good news. One of the things that we've been working on in the past year or so has been improvements in how we deliver capital projects. We undertook or completed the general engineering standards, which provides a base for engineers to design. With the city's needs are very clearly identified, and that streamlines the design process. Moving on to construction, we've been updating our technical specifications, special provisions, details of more the mechanical elements of how we build projects. We've been standardizing those, bringing those more consistent with the Maricopa Association of Governments standards that we reference, customizing those for our locale, elevation, soil conditions, etc., and specializing it for the city. So we've been working on that to streamline the construction process. We've also been working on our internal processes and standardizing how we do business, SOPs. From everything from inspections to how we do things, so we're more consistent, more efficient, and keeps the projects moving along to delivery. We're also incorporating new processes. One of the goals we have as a department is to be the leader in the area. So we're looking at new ways of doing things. We're looking at different types of asphalt that are supposed to give us longer life on our pavements. We're looking at utilizing a underground utility locating process using ground penetrating radar, where we find pipes before we have a backhoe find them. Much cheaper and more efficient to find it early, especially in the downtown area. There's a lot of infrastructure that's been there, partially abandoned, partially removed, and for a live line that's not here, it's over there. So we're finding that this ground penetrating radar process is really a cost savings and a project delivery expediting process, so we can deliver the projects more efficiently and quickly. Another area that we briefed you on last year was integrated or alternative project delivery methods. The tradition was design it, bid it, and build it. We're starting to look more and more. You've had one contract come before you. We have another one coming in the design build, where we partner with the contractor and include them in the design process to work out some of the bugs of constructability, improving design processes, improving the construction process to deliver a better, more efficient project. We're also looking at another thing that we council approved last year was our on-call professional services, where we had pre-qualification of consultants in a variety of areas, and now we're able to procure consultants to assist us in our design much more efficiently. Where it used to take several months to get a consultant on board to start a design, we can now do that in a matter of weeks or even days, depending on the size of the project. We're much quicker to deliver. One of the other programs that we're very excited about is our Lunch and Learn program, where we take our processes and experiences out to the design community, the construction community, working with our partner YCCA to partner and clear up issues in the field, whether it's an inspection issue, a grading issue, erosion sediment control process, and helping the contractors and designers understand what our needs are, understand what their needs are, and work together to deliver projects more efficiently. Again, the whole idea is customer service and how can we get a single-family house built more quickly, which gets a person into the house more efficiently, which helps the contractor get done quickly and get on to the next project. Same thing with our inspection services, getting everybody to work together. So that's, in a nutshell, a lot of the things that we've been working on in the past year, 2 years to deliver projects more efficiently. The capital program in Public Works is funded by 3 major funds and a few other sources. The water fund, primarily the water projects that are in the capital program, are for the replacement of aged critical infrastructure, but it's usually as needed. We find a line that's been giving us a lot of maintenance, we go fix it. We haven't had that replacement program that Henry mentioned a few moments ago to where we're proactive. Our current projects are more reactive. We see a deficiency, we have to go fix it. Did you have a question?
Mayor, Steve, is this where that one contractor, that company that puts the lining in comes into place?
Yes. And yes.
Okay.
That would be one of the ways that we can do that more efficiently. Actually, it's in the wastewater fund, but it's that same process. We look at system improvements for deficiencies. We see a pump station that's needing a lot of maintenance. We look at ways to make improvements to it as a Band-Aid. We don't look at it as a forward-thinking way. We just try to make it work and keep it moving. Well maintenance. You'll be seeing a contract, I believe at the next meeting, for a well maintenance program for our Chino Valley well field. So we're being more proactive in that area and looking at fixing things that have been in the ground for 40, 50 years, making them work more efficiently and things. Tank maintenance, same thing, where we have a large storage tank. We're currently working on the south tank up in Acker Park, getting the water system, keeping it up as a high-quality, first-class system. Same thing with pumps. System efficiencies, again, that's more looking at cost savings and improving performance by trying to look at our system differently. Our system is very integrated. So we're looking at ways to have less equipment that can either fail or to be maintained. How can we serve our system more efficiently with less? So we're looking at that. Very similarly with the wastewater fund, only with different systems. We have the water reclamation facility, the centralization project, which is a big part of the cost savings and improved performance. We're trying to have, we had one reclamation facility at Sundog that was aging, needing a lot of work. And if we expand and centralize, which this council gave us a direction to do, we can do more with less. We have one facility and creating that, and you'll be seeing some centralization projects at our next council meeting on the 28th. Third major fund is the streets fund. So we look at preservation projects for pavement, rehabilitation projects, reconstruction projects. We've talked about the difference of those and how we do things. We look at street drainage improvements and sidewalks. That's primarily what the streets fund goes towards within our public works group. One other thing, 2 other funding sources. The solid waste fund, since solid waste is now part of public works, they have a fund that provides for their capital needs. We also receive funding from Yavapai County Flood Control District to supplement our flood control projects and drainage improvements. And there are some grant projects we get. Now, where are we with our project? The current budget for the capital improvement program for Public Works last year that approved by council was just under $60 million. In addition to that, the solid waste division had just under $700,000 budgeted. Those projects totaled about 57 different projects to deliver this year. We're on track to deliver most of them. As of the 31st of December, we had encumbered or expended almost $20 million of our $60 million budget. By March 31st, we'll have encumbered or expended another $20 million. And between now and the end of the fiscal year, we're on track to expend a total of $54 million out of the 60.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just interject here. Stephen, I want to make this clear, everybody watching and listening and writing in the newspaper. $60 million is coming out of a fund that cannot pay for PSPRS. Is that correct?
That is correct. Those were the funds
Okay.
I just discussed, the water, sewer, or wastewater and streets funds.
I just want to make that clear. Those funds are restricted, and they have to be spent on sewer and water and on roads. They cannot be spent on anything else. Unless we borrow it, then they wouldn't have any money.
True.
But I just want to, I got to put that out there every single time, because somehow I'll get a call, an email, a letter saying, how can you spend $60 million here and not on the PSPRS? And I'm just going to beat this dead horse until it's really dead. So.
These are dedicated funds, aren't they, John?
Yes.
That were approved by the voter?
Yeah, the 1% streets tax is dedicated to street repair, street maintenance, street construction, those kinds of things. The solid waste fund is paid for by solid waste fees by users, as are wastewater and water. And just to sort of address the borrowing issue, that's not free money. That has to be paid back. And generally speaking, even if it's 0%, it still has to be paid back from some source. So it's borrowing is different than stealing. You can't steal from those funds. You have to somehow pay it back.
Right, thank you.
And a lot of these projects that we'll talk about here on the next slide over the next 5 years are part of our infrastructure improvement program, which is monies assessed on users that have to go towards specific projects and have a certain delivery date within 10 years, within 15 years. So we're into those programs as well. As just a snapshot for the next 5 years, we have about 119 projects on the books of projects that we need to complete, and that total is estimated around 190 million. Of that, about 54 million is in the water fund, 66 in the wastewater fund, and just over 70 million in the street fund. So we have that much need that we on the books right now, and that does not include the replacement program Mr. Hash alluded to at the beginning on the water and wastewater side, nor the 74 million on the streets backlogged. So those would be additive to this. This is just what's on our books for projects we're on our list to deliver over the next 5 years. Here is a list of 6 projects that we've completed in the first 6 months. The Walker Road reconstruction, Smoke Tree, Crystal Lane, the Willow Creek Road realignment project, which was a joint project with the county, very successful project. And then we had the 2 drainage projects that we used a lot of the flood control money on in Yavapai Hills for the Sunrise and Hummingbird Culvert replacement, and then a small drainage project to reduce drainage issues on some private residents. So that's what we've completed in the first 6 months. We have several projects under construction right now. The tank rehabilitation program right now, the SCADA, which is a design build contract that's in process right now. We have the pavement preservation rehab project going on Larkin Street, just around the corner. You've probably seen some activity there. That's ongoing. And then another partnership in the Walden Ranch Airport trunk main. The developer in Walden Ranch is developing that area. Our airport trunk main is going through that area. We partnered with them to construct that portion ahead of schedule to minimize the impact of the development and to make it more efficient for the city cost-wise. So instead of having them build the road system and then us come back 6 months, a year later and tear it up and put in a water line, or a wastewater line, we partnered and had it done first. So.
Steve, going back to a Larkin.
Yes.
And whether you or Henry answer this. I know there was a lot of communication prior to that project. Is the communication still being kept up with everybody on that road?
Very much
as far
so.
as what you're doing, when you're going to be done, what, you know, how it's affecting them and the times.
Very
and how
much
it
so. And a
works.
quick update on that. We just met 11 o'clock this morning on the project, and the contractor had indicated that everybody's been working really well and cooperating. They know there's a construction project going on. They're working with keeping the vehicles off of a Larkin so that contractor can get their work done most efficiently, because they know if they can get in and get out, they can get the road back.
Good, thank you.
So looking forward the next 3 months, which would be the end of March, we're looking to have several other projects under contract or bidding. 3 in the streets fund, the Marina Street improvements, which are just around the corner, the 89 widening project, which is south of 89A, as part of the ADOT construction project on improving 89 between Prescott and Chino Valley. We have 4 of the 5 wastewater projects are part of the centralization. Those will be coming next week, or next meeting to you for approval. In the water fund, we have a new well development out to bid right now. We have other projects that are improving our water system, including the Willis-Cortez intersection improvements, which is fixing the intersection where the water line broke a few years ago, and taking the opportunity to enhance that intersection with some of the streetscape improvements that we're doing as well. So we've got a lot going on. Solid Waste Fund, we have the 3 projects going out there at the transfer station. So we're making progress here. For the rest of the fiscal year, we have these projects in the street fund that are on the books to get out to bid or under construction. Some are drainage, like the Acker Detention Pond, which is another partnership with the development of Tenney Ranch. As you recall, for that project, we're going to kick off the design for Gurley Street reconstruction, which is the next street that has drainage improvements and also streetscape improvements. We're going to hear about the Goodwin project coming up. That's not on the list here, but the other part of the streetscape on the other side of the square. We have a variety of projects, including the Bashford parking lot and alley improvements. We've been working with the property owners, utilities, trying to get everybody coordinated, because it's quite the busy place to improve, and it does need improving.
Excuse me.
Yes?
On the Penn Eastwood project,
Yes.
there's one street that was left off of that project that's in very bad shape. It's Hillcrest. And there's a little portion of it that is shown on the plan to be reconstructed where it crosses a drainage. Would it be possible to take another look at including the rest of Hillcrest in that project?
We can take a look at that. The project's fairly far down the design process. If it can't get into this construction project, we can identify that as a supplemental project, get it in the next year's budget, and then build it fairly quickly after the Penn Eastwood project gets completed.
Okay.
So-
Would it be more efficient to include it in the
It might,
current
but
project?
again, if the whole project's, say, 90% done, and we add in something that starts at 0, trying to get that part of the project up to speed, get the topography, get the utility coordination, get the design improvements through, it may delay the whole project, which we really don't want to do. So we want to look at the most efficient way to deliver the whole project, and understanding that Hillcrest is an important part, but it's very late in the design process right now. So we'll evaluate if we can incorporate it to deliver it at the same time. Great, we'll do that, but we won't forget about it. And
You might be seeing a bunch of residents on that street sitting in your office asking about it.
that usually happens because when we replace one street, the next street over usually says, well, why not us? So it's very common, so we try to address those.
Not that I want to say it different, but if fixing the road could mean just a simple resurfacing and others, we can simply add it. But if there's more detail and more design, then we go what Mr. Oro said. But otherwise, we can simply add it. That should not add too much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve.
Yes.
I noticed that we have another meeting on Robinson Drive.
Yes.
Where are we as far as that's concerned, as far as that project?
That project is slightly beyond the 6-month window. It'll probably go to bid over the summer, early fall. We are beyond the 60% level, so it's very far down the road. We're having a second public meeting to inform the community on what we heard at the first public meeting, the enhancements we made, the responsiveness that we've made to the citizen requests, your input. So we're at that point now where we've heard, we've listened, we've taken steps, and now we're saying here's where we're at as we get moving towards the finalization of the project.
Thank you.
And also in the wastewater funds, we have other projects that are coming as well. Some design projects, model updates, some construction projects, water, wastewater. These are all in the works to get out to bid or encumbered funds by the end of the fiscal year. Now, in addition to the work that we have on our CIP program, we also are assisting Fleet Facilities and Water Resources with a variety of other projects. The rodeo grounds that we spoke on last meeting is well underway and moving towards completion before the rodeo. The Granite Street garage stairs needs some work, and we're assisting Fleet and Facilities on that. And also, you'll hear about a little bit more on the Big Chino project. The third item today's agenda, the TMDL monitoring plan, the MS4 permit updates and things. So that's the water quality issues. So we're very busy with a variety of projects.
Okay, we got a question from Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Very similar to Councilwoman Wilcox a week or two ago when we talked about the rodeo grounds.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of reservations on spending money on something that doesn't have a positive impact on public health and safety. And it was demonstrated to us when we discussed that project that there was an imminent risk to public health and safety with regards to the electrical wiring, etc. But at this point in time, until we get a grip on what we're going to do with PSPRS, I have no interest in sitting here listening to things that are on the wish list, not on the need list. Just sharing it with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and that is the end of our presentation for the update on the capital program. So if there's any other questions, we're glad to try to respond to those.
John, go ahead.
I think I would just actually add or comment on to the Mayor Pro Tem's comment. A lot, and I'll let Steve or Henry sort of go into detail, but a lot of the utility work, the wastewater and water, are either in some way mandated by ADEQ, EPA, clean water and those kinds of things, or they're preventative, particularly the wastewater replacement of wastewater lines and those kinds of things, because obviously if we have an old line or a bad line that overflows, we have issues with ADEQ. So a lot of this work is none of this. I don't think any of the water wastewater stuff is sort of luxury work or unnecessary. Most of it is either mandated directly or in some form or another indirectly mandated to prevent either wastewater spills or to make sure that we have properly delivered clean drinking water. So I think these aren't beautification type projects at all. I think it's fair to characterize them as mandatory in one way or another, at least the water wastewater stuff.
If I may, Mayor, I just want to say thank you, John. Exactly. So when Mr. Oroz was giving a presentation for the next 5 years, there was $194 or $94 million expressed the needs. These are not wants, desires. We either do it because we are told to do it, or we need to do it so our system will not fail. It's complicated. Our system is really complicated. There are roads, but especially water and wastewater. I'm particularly sensitive to water, always have. This is one thing that I try to keep it within the expertise and experts, because if something goes wrong with the road, may have an accident, which is unfortunate. If something goes wrong with wastewater, we get fines and penalties, big time. If something goes wrong with water, we could literally make many people sick or kill them. That's one thing I keep it to experts only, and we have to do all of this. We have no choice.
Okay, I'll go to questions, comments from the council. Councilwoman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern about spending money on the rodeo a couple weeks ago was that that money was coming from the general fund, and I just thought it was wrong timing, given the issues we're facing with the pension unfunded liability. The projects you're talking about are streets, water, wastewater, solid waste. Those come from separate funds.
Correct.
And they're well-funded. I think you have planned well with your 5-year capital improvement plan. And it's a big challenge, as you've said, in this city, which is very complex. And there's been an awful lot of deferred maintenance, out of sight, out of mind, as Henry put it. Welcome to the 21st century, Prescott. It's only 2017, and it's about time that we get a handle on these hidden problems.
That's very correct. We focus, our 5-year CIP is only on needs, and the last slide about some other projects that we're assisting to make sure those projects get delivered most efficiently. So we're just helping them get it done quickly.
Councilwoman Orr.
Yes, Steve, thank you for reaching out to the Downtown Partnership and working with them.
Absolutely.
When we're downtown working, I appreciate that.
Yes.
And finding those extra parking spots. It's good.
That is our goal.
I am getting calls about Smoke Tree. I know
Okay.
the completed was the west side of Smoke Tree, and the other side of Smoke Tree, closer to Prescott Lakes Parkway, is in need. And I know Henry and I have spoken about this.
Yep.
So is this officially in the 5-year plan?
Not today. That is one of the things that, as we're updating our 5-year CIP, which moves 1 year at a time, and we have the ability to adjust to it, and new needs, we are going to be looking at this east end of Smoke Tree as dollar-wise what we can estimate what it might cost, see where that would fit in our 5-year CIP program. Again, that's mostly street funded for the improvements, so we have to see what the dollars are and try to see where it's most efficient.
It seems to be an area that really needs some assistance.
Yes.
It's sinking. Okay.
Yes.
Just
we're aware
on your
of that.
radar, I know.
It is.
Thank you.
One of the things I'll say is I think our customer service has improved. I'm hearing it from the various contractors. So I commend you on that and appreciate you moving forward. Quite often I have contractors say, well, you know, it's a lot easier to do things in PV, but I know that sometimes when you take a look at some of the work that's been done down there, I'm not sure they're maintaining the same level of codes that we have, that we require the people to meet here. So
Yes.
We'll see how long that House of Cards works. Have you seen any greater synergy in the realignment of streets to public works?
I think Henry can, I can address part of that, and I think Henry could probably expand on it. But I have seen, working with the streets maintenance people, we've already started collaborating a lot more on maintenance projects, making sure we're not duplicating effort, having them go maintain something, then we come in with a capital project shortly thereafter and, you know, really fix whatever everything it is versus just a patch or something. We're looking at additional programs, alleys, curbing, other maintenance programs that we can be more proactive in fixing needs versus just being reactive all the time. So we're seeing a lot of improvement in that area. Same thing with the solid waste division. We're seeing a lot more coordination. We're getting, we've had just 2 meetings this week with the solid waste division, incorporating into some of the other projects we're doing, and we're getting great feedback and information in a more proactive manner.
Okay, go ahead.
And if I may add, he's correct, Mayor. I think things just fell in place. It makes sense to have it this way. We're all in it. So I believe it's going to be much efficiency, better product, more coordination. It's new within a year or so. I hope that we can come back to you and show you all the efficiencies we have done, improvements, do it once, do it correctly, Yeah, so thanks to all of you that I believe it's a good thing in all areas. Just going back to customer service is really, really important for us because we know how important it is for you. This Lunch and Learn, we have been working with contractors and developers. This is in partnership with Contractor Association, Sandy Griffiths. So people used to say, and they still do, that things are easier in PV. I've heard this for 30 years, Mayor, being a director in different places. So when I called my peer in the other county or city, they say, oh, he was here and said that it's easier with you. Just to be honest in here. However, the engineering standard we put in place, we did all the work, took us many years. You were all very supportive, and indeed we had 100% or 101% of our stakeholders, and we have a cake to prove it that Sandy Griffiths gave it to us. Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, they couldn't wait for us to finish it. We did all the work. They copied it exactly the same. That's why now we call it Quad City. So if somebody says it's different in Prescott Valley, we all have the same document and we follow the same standard. So they need to come up with new things.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks. Last thing is, I know I talked to various people that say it seems like some of the projects that have been mentioned in the past haven't come to fruition, and it's taken a long time. And I know we had discussion recently where you indicated that it seemed like we used to do a lot of planning and design, and then we went into a great construction period, and then we went back to planning and design. And I think you're trying to level that out. Could you explain that very quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To have a smooth flow of work, both for the contractors and design community, you want a balance of construction projects and design projects going at the same time. About 2-3 years ago, we got into a very heavy design cycle. We still were getting some projects constructed, but we had 40 projects in design of various stages of things. Now, as you're seeing, we're getting projects out to bid and getting those design projects out, but we're also starting other design projects and trying to get that balance. I was just talking with our utility manager this morning, and our collective goal is to try to put water projects and wastewater projects out at a certain time of year that's more conducive to utility work, and other projects, street projects, out at a time of year where it's better for street projects. We're not there yet. We're just trying to get projects delivered best way possible, but that's the other part of balancing all the projects, is trying to get projects out to bid at the right time of year where it's more advantageous for the city to get the contractors information on bidding, and this time of year where it's a little slower, where they can plan their year, try to get better bid prices. So we're trying to balance all these things, but we're playing catch up in a lot of areas. So we're getting to that balanced construction design cycle.
Okay, thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Okay, let's move on to B. Thank you.
Item B, presentation by Public Works and the design consultant for the Goodwin Street Improvement Project.
So you're back, huh?
I'm back. Let me make a little switch here. Okay, Mark, where'd you put it? There it is. Yep. All right. Not going to break it, Mark. All right. On to a more project-specific. We started this Goodwin Street Improvement Project recently, and we're at a early design level, 15% as we call it. Basically, we're getting the concepts of the project worked out with the design consultant. We want to get some input from council, input from the public very early in the design process. Here's things we're looking at, etc. What's important to you? So we can incorporate those early in the design and move forward through the project. The project limits are basically where the Park Avenue project left off at Hill Avenue on Summit, continuing down Goodwin to the east, all the way past the Courthouse Square to Marina Street, where the Marina Street project picks up and goes north. So the extent of the project is fairly substantial in the life of the city. The purposes of the project are, why are we doing this? One of the key drivers of this project was the knowledge that there is some significant drainage issues on Whiskey Row. Businesses are impacted during heavy certain storm events. There's very tall curbs. We have pylons to protect cars from hitting the curbs. It's not a real efficient system from a drainage perspective. Also, we've been looking at ways to increase parking downtown, and that's one of the other goals of the project, is to find ways to not only fix the drainage, improve parking, pedestrian safety, how can we make it a more attractive place to be in the downtown, and how can we make the area better, not just paint it black and put a pipe in the ground. So that's the purpose of the project. The city's retained the firm of Husk and Ryan to do our design with us. We have completed the field surveys. We're just starting the ground penetrating radar process, where we're locating all the utilities on the project. We've got a 15% level design, and that's where we're at right now. We have a concept, we have some ideas, and we have our first public community meeting March 1st. So we're getting ready to get this project out to start getting public input. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Maloney from Husk and Ryan, who's their project manager, to kind of explain the project goals and things. Was there a question before we?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, my name is Mark Maloney with Husk and Ryan Consultants, 147 Grove Avenue, Prescott, Arizona. As Steve mentioned, a lot of the big issues that Husk and Ryan's is considering on this project are the flooding problems on Goodwin Street. As you can see with this slide right here, these are the contributing drainage areas that impact Goodwin. Right now, everything is surface flow on the streets, and our plan is to put all the surface water in a storm drain system that can be conveyed to the Granite Creek. Some of the other drainage issues existing today are on Goodwin Street itself. There's a lot of undershoots. As I mentioned, the runoff is conveyed on the street to undershoots that go underneath the intersection just to be released back into the street. So by introducing a storm drain system and actually getting the water off the road, we can decrease the flooding around the Whiskey Row area and other intersections. You can see a picture of the high curb in the bottom right over there. Those are curbs that are roughly have up to a 12-inch reveal. Certain issues occur when we have that problem in terms of cars parking up against the curb, water flowing down the street, down the curb, and the actual tire acting as like a dam and pushing the water up on the sidewalks. By reducing that curb height and getting the water off the street, we actually eliminate that problem and other issues such as cars running into the curb and so forth. So these are some of the issues that we would like to take care of or have discussed with Public Works to take care of. This is a picture of the stormwater conveyance system on Summit Avenue. I think we're looking directly at Goodwin Street right here. There's an asphalt channel adjacent to the road. We'd like to go ahead and make improvements to that, kind of improving the asphalt channel adjacent to the road, but also providing a better collection of stormwater, getting it into a storm drain and outletting directly to Granite Creek. Some of the things that we can accomplish through this design too is kind of dressing up the area in terms of the asphalt channel on the side of the road. We have discussed some plans with staff for making the situation better. One good example is within Granite Creek itself. This is a location that we proposed for outletting into the creek itself. This is south of Goodwin Street within Granite Creek itself, and there's a wall, retaining wall that is supporting the parking lot of the adjacent business. At this location, it's an opportunity for us to put a pipe out, the storm drain pipe, and outlet it into Granite Creek, and an opportunity to kind of fix up a situation where we have a wire-tied, broken cinder block, retainer wall adjacent to the creek. Some things that we can do to help alleviate, to not only help with the flooding situation and outlet into the creek itself, but dress up the situation a little bit in terms of the wall itself. I know the trail system in Granite Creek is kind of an important amenity in the city, and we think we can help with that as well. This is the typical existing intersection at Montezuma and Goodwin Street. Some of the key points that Steve mentioned, important factors for this project are pedestrian safety. Some things that we can do to alleviate that problem is to build out the intersections. A lot of the intersections right now exist at grade type crossings for pedestrians, where pedestrians actually stand out almost in the intersection itself, and when people turn the corner, it just proposes a safety issue. By building out, along with the slide as well, Steve mentioned one huge goal is to help the parking situation in downtown. Certain situations next to the town square, we have parallel parking. We've come up with some concepts where when we build out the intersections, we can actually introduce in some more angled parking. So we feel that we can actually add a handful of spaces. As I mentioned, and this is a picture here, you can see the existing picture right there where the crosswalks kind of just come up to the existing sidewalks. When we go to the next slide, you'll see how the intersections are built out a little bit, providing a refuge area for that pedestrian to stand before crossing the street. In addition to that safety buffer area, it also provides a shorter distance across the street itself by bringing the intersections closer out into the roadway, curbed up, of course. And also by doing that in this intersection where there is a significant flooding problem on the northwest corner of Montezuma and Goodwin, by bringing that curb line up or the street down, getting the water in a storm drain where we can alleviate that flooding hazard, particularly in this location. This is a slide of looking northeast at the town square, kind of a perspective of the type of improvements that we'd be looking at. You can see the landscape medians. An important part of this project is also streetscape and beautification. While that maybe not being so important as the immediate issues of flooding and parking and so forth, we feel and have been instructed by Public Works to accomplish a goal of maybe trying to introduce some, at the square here, we've shown some benching out on the north corner, some landscaping, kind of improving the streetscape and carrying that out into other parts as we progress down Goodwin as well, trying to draw people out of the downtown, just immediate area of town square, trying to draw people into other portions of the downtown area. Another location that's been discussed, I think one of the goals too is where we can provide more pedestrian circulation or pedestrian access, wider sidewalks have been desired. One particular location is near Mile High Middle School. On the south side of the road, there's some fairly narrow sidewalk that we feel we could improve. There's also been some talk about providing some access to the Mile High Middle School site. On this slide, you can see a proposal to kind of take people off the street there, get them up into the school site for public events and so forth.
I've got a question, if I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
You would coming from the west, from Summit Avenue, when you go across Goodwin Street Plaza there and you're coming on Goodwin Street, that always is an issue here for site visibility. People have to pull out off of Granite Street to see traffic coming from either side.
Sure.
It seemed to me at some point in time there would be an opportunity to look at a three-way stop and a crosswalk configuration in there to slow traffic and also to move pedestrian traffic.
Sure. Councilmember Blair, thank you for the input. I know part of this, as I mentioned, by bringing out these intersections, by doing that, it kind of brings the traffic out closer to the roadway in a stop condition before they proceed out into the road. So I think that could help with the situation and visibility as well. I'm not particularly understand the exact location that you're talking about, but it has been discussed with staff.
It's an issue early in the morning, more so than anything.
Correct.
In late afternoon, people use Summit Street, which is probably the most pathetic street we have in the city as far as maintenance.
We'll get to that one in just a second.
People are taking that and moving towards the south and hitting Goodwin Street and coming to beat the traffic that goes through downtown Prescott. You know, and I know people are in a hurry, but on the other hand, that's such a beautiful area in there. If we truly are going to beautify things and make it a public safety issue, then we ought to look at putting some kind of traffic control there.
I agree, Steve. Right there is, because you're coming down and you're actually bringing your truck or car all the way out to look past those cars.
Right. And that's what we've been working with Husk and Ryan with. Is it's kind of hard to see because there's some trees on this exhibit, but we've pulled out the intersection corners further out into Goodwin Street to give a little buffer so people can move out and see much better. We've also tried to keep the pedestrian crossing on the west side of the intersection a shorter distance because we've pulled up the south curb to make the pedestrian crossing smaller, improve visibility, and make the intersection feel smaller, because right now it feels huge.
Yes.
And I'm definitely not an engineer, but the philosophy of reducing the curb height from 18 to 12 doesn't, in my opinion, solve the gutter issue. You have a lot of water moving downhill. To me, it would seem more practical to put more of a grate system in and water underground drainage. Around this town, all over the place, we have a lack of those drainage grates to get the water off the surface. Right. We just can't keep running it down the road, regardless of whether you have a 12-inch or you have an 18. If that tires against that curb, you got an issue.
Correct, and that's what we're working on, is getting, in addition to making the curb height more consistent throughout the area, we're also looking at the underground stormwater system with grates to get the water off the street into a pipe and then into the creek most efficiently.
We got a couple questions here, Councilman Shiska.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Going east on Goodwin, trying to turn south on Montezuma, it seems like it's awfully tight in there, because if somebody's coming in and they're turning left on Montezuma to go west on Goodwin, that's a really tight turn. And I feel like sometimes I have a truck, but even in a car, I feel like sometimes when I turn right on that intersection, you're just about running into the guy turning left. So is there any way to widen that?
And that's one of the items that we're looking at, the intersection, how the vehicles turn. Husk and Ryan does have some software to simulate vehicle turning, which we're running through the project to make sure trucks, small cars, delivery vehicles, emergency vehicles can maneuver through these intersections as part of our design. So we are taking that into account.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Here again, Mr. Oros, very similar to my comment last time. As far as the drainage, as far as the safety, etc., I'm more interested in that at this particular point in time. While I realize it's out of a dedicated revenue stream, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I just heard your supervisor tell us we got $80 million with a backlog of roads that haven't been fixed. So it's a matter of priorities from a standpoint of expenditure.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, am I in line or somebody
No,
else?
if you got a quick.
Just real quick to follow up on Jim. Yeah, these things, I believe they appear to be foo-foo, but right now, this is to pull that downtown area, and this is pennies, and instead of later coming back and doing this. We've had this conversation before, Henry, that this is minimal at this point in time with this project.
Okay.
Each one has to be evaluated on its own merit.
I agree.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Where are the bike lanes?
You don't see a lot of striping on there, no.
Oh, you don't.
Again, this is very early concept level work. We are looking at accommodating bicycles on the roadway on Goodwin Street. Similar, most likely in fashion to what we are doing on Alarcon, where there's the Sharrow for bikes and vehicles to be aware of each other on the roadway. We are improving the pedestrian sidewalks and crosswalks so that it's more pedestrian friendly, more bike friendly, more vehicle friendly, just a whole better place to be in the downtown area. And that's one of the economic benefits of doing these projects, is that we've seen it on Park Avenue, we've seen it in Mount Vernon. Every time we do a street improvement project, even if it's very minimal landscaping and things, the whole area starts to improve. So that's one of the things we're looking at with these downtown projects.
I'm not excited about angle parking, because right
Okay.
now we have a chronic problem with oversized vehicles using angle parking, especially on Gurley between Cortez and Montezuma. And it is a real nuisance, and it's difficult to have parking enforcement officers out there 24/7.
Right.
But it does impede traffic. When you have 2 lanes along a street like Gurley, one lane has to move over half a lane just to
Right.
get out of the way of a large vehicle.
Absolutely.
We've got to learn how to parallel park. I did when I was 16. I couldn't back up, but I could parallel park.
So one of the things, very good observation, Councilwoman. The issues that we're looking at here is trying to not go with a bare minimum 8 or 8.5 foot wide stall. We're going with the full 9 foot wide stalls, which a lot of our trucks will fit in. We're looking at not having a travel lane right behind the parking stall. We're looking on Goodwin, it's 1 lane in each direction with a left turn lane, so it's just 3 lanes instead of 4. So we're providing a little more room to have a truck parked in there that goes to the curb when it's a lower curb instead of a taller curb. Again, pulling the vehicles away from the travel lane, allowing bikes and vehicles to travel through there. So we are aware of that and we are working on it. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Councilwoman Orr.
Gene, I have one of my pluses. I have 4 pluses, and one is angled parking, because I drive a Suburban, and because it provides more parking spots. I mean, and that's certainly something that we need downtown. I serve on the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and I know that these issues will come before the committee. Absolutely. We meet Thursday, and so I see some positive things that they will be happy with. The wider sidewalk, that's great, because it's definitely needed there, and also the access to Mile High. Because the more that we push events over there, we certainly need access rather than people having to walk around. I think that's it. Nice job, Mark. Thank you very much.
We're not quite done yet.
Well,
Well,
no,
still
but it
more to
looks
come.
good.
I've got another question here.
And I've got one other comment, if you don't mind, Mayor, is that this is kind of an underused, when you think about Whiskey Row and downtown, that's kind of that intersection isn't something that comes to your mind. I think this will actually draw people over to that undeveloped area that we hopefully will continue to develop.
That is one of the goals of the project. So,
nice.
Thank you.
Councilman Blair.
In other places that I've been in following with Gene, those sidewalks on both sides of that road, I don't see that there's probably any reason why they couldn't be 8 foot wide and be indicated as multi-purpose paths. so that they're striped that way, so you have 2 foot or 4 foot, 4 foot. They use them all over. It's just a signage issue, be aware. But I think we have the room to put those facilities on this road.
Okay. We'll take a look at that and see if that actually works. So thank you.
Okay, continue.
Okay.
Thank you. In fact, we've been instructed on any of the pedestrian improvements to come up with a minimum of 5-foot access. Some of the sidewalks even go down to 4 foot, particularly in this location here. So that is certainly one of the considerations. There's a perspective view, kind of just a concept. Nothing's baked yet, but providing some seating in the area. And it is kind of a vertical change from the road, so getting them up onto the Mile High site. Certainly one of the important things discussed early on in this project was issues regarding traffic safety, pedestrian safety at the intersection of Summit and Goodwin Street. With the alley, Summit Avenue and Goodwin and Bridge Street, that's a 5-way intersection of acute angles. Traffic tends to come from the southern direction up Summit and make the traffic movement directly onto Goodwin, heading downtown, which doesn't provide the safest movement of traffic. One of the things Hoskin Ryan has looked at, we've discussed a number of different options, but one of them is a traffic circle, which works well in this circumstance because of the 5 intersection points coming together. We think it improves visibility, pedestrian safety, traffic circulation. I think it also provides a terminus to downtown, where if people are looking for parking spaces, they're coming down Goodwin Street, it gives them an opportunity to turn around, head back, and find additional parking. We think it's also kind of a good indicator between the public portion of downtown and the separation between the residential district. It could provide an opportunity to provide public art, landscaping, a number of different situations. This is something that we're looking at as we move forward into the 30% design. I think that pretty much concludes our presentation. If you have any questions for myself or Steve additionally, be happy to answer them for you.
Councilman Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor. I love the tentative design. It's going to look really sharp when it's all done, once we put all the ingredients in it. Like we did with the Larkin and the improvements up to there, we included the bicycle community, Prescott Creeks, bioremediation. All of that's going to take into account here to hopefully clean up some of that water before it hits the creek.
That is correct. One of the items that we're still in early process on is trying to have some kind of subsurface water quality element in the project. We've started conversations with the school district about utilizing part of that field area as an underground basin to keep the surface the same, but have a water quality element underground like a lot of the commercial developments are doing throughout the city to slow down the water, improve the water quality before it outflows into Granite Creek. So we're looking at those sorts of elements.
And another thing, I know there's not a lot of them along this road, but there is a few key empty lots. And instead of waiting for them to develop it and then cutting up our new road to tie in their new sewer and water, could we stub those out prior?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? One thing I'll talk about is sometimes I come down West Goodwin and I notice that since we had the snows at Christmas time, we continually have water going down that south gully, I guess, or where there is no sidewalk, but there's kind of an asphalt drainage system there. Do we know if that's from underground springs providing a lot of water into that area? Or?
What we've seen and do see on a regular basis, when we get the snows, when we get the rains, a lot of that percolates into the ground, and we see it coming up different places just from the groundwater infiltration. And then it continues because the snow melts over time and it just keeps feeding that water flowing through there. One of the goals of the project is to channelize that groundwater drainage areas into a facility away from the road, away from people walking, so that it can do its thing and get through the water system and into the creek.
Are we looking for improved parking on that area also?
Absolutely.
Is it going to be angled parking?
Yes,
Okay.
mostly. Sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mary. Just remind me, you were talking about groundwater and underground and all that other stuff. On the way down here today, walking up the street, there's water coming up out of the sidewalk in front of the Baptist church. Just thought I'd share it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take some public comment if anybody wants to comment on this project.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Sandra Smith, 701 White Bar, Prescott. Those traffic circles are a problem for alternative mobility people. You set the crossings out where people are not going to stop with their cars. These things don't pick up speed, especially when you grade a road so that the water drains off the road. I understand that. That's fine. But then that has to start going uphill. And if there's a grade that the road is along too, that makes the grade even worse. I have that problem at Brookside and White's Bar, where the road actually sits at an angle. Drivers don't want to stop. If I have a traffic light, they stop. If I don't have a traffic light, they aren't going to stop. That means you cut off parts of town to people using alternative mobility because they can't get across safely. Just something to think about.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to C.
Item C, agreement for hydrogeological modeling services, Big Chino Subbasin groundwater flow model.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Let me switch slideshows here. Well, good afternoon again, Mayor Oberg and council members. I'm Leslie Grazer, Water Resource Manager for the city. The item before you today, like many city projects, requires the teaming of 2 or more city departments. Ben Burns, Public Works Engineering, is the Capital Improvements Program Manager for this prospective contract and is also present today to assist with questions. The purpose of this study session is to provide brief information on a groundwater flow modeling contract prior to its placement on the Council's February 28, 2017 voting session. The purpose of the prospective contract is to create a groundwater flow model pursuant to the Council-approved Agreement in Principle and Comprehensive Agreement Number 1 pertaining to the Big Chino Importation Project. Development of the model is necessary to advance the understanding of the groundwater systems in the Big Chino Subbasin and the surrounding area. The model will facilitate assessment of pumping impacts, if any, to the groundwater system and the Upper Verde Springs. The scope of the work has been reviewed by the parties to the comprehensive agreement, which include the City of Prescott, Town of Prescott Valley, and the Salt River Valley Water Users Association and Salt River Project Agricultural Improvement and Power District, SRP. The city is the financial agent for the comprehensive agreement number 1, is responsible for the contracting, payments, and other administrative matters. I have 7 slides today, and I'll work through them fairly quickly. Models bring different pictures to people's minds based on their experience with the subject matter. Groundwater models are computer models of groundwater flow systems and are used by hydrogeologists. Groundwater models are used to simulate and assess possible aquifer conditions. This is a quick example here. The model that will be used is an industry standard known as ModFlow. The illustration above shows the grid system that's placed on the area of interest. For our discussion, the area of interest, of course, is the Big Chino Subbasin, and both the geologic structure and the hydraulic properties are developed or refined, and data new or existing is applied to these blocks. So, grid system on top of the land surface, and then it goes down into the aquifer units, so it can further assess where the water's moving, what kind of geology it's moving through. This is the work area. This slide and the remainder are directly from the prospective contract. I apologize. I think like most of you, I'm running with a cold too today.
You didn't get it from me.
No, I can say I have a child at home, so sorry. Let me get back to where we were at. Excuse me. The slide and the remainder of the slides today are for this prospective contract is from Golder and Associates. So we are located in Chambers down in this location. You drive up this way through Chino Valley and up into the headwater area right here, and then the Big Chino Ranch Road goes up into the basin. The city's land acquisition is up in this area. I-40, I apologize, it's very faint, is right through here. So on this map, there's a red dotted line, and that is the preliminary area for data evaluation for this proposed contract. I apologize, that's very hard to read. The proposed model will need to rely on an extensive data set. Some of the existing data, or some of the data is existing while some is being collected under separate contracts that have been previously approved by council. Examples of the newer data sets are related to geophysics, so that improves the understanding of the aquifer structure, and geochemistry, which improves the understanding of groundwater flow paths. The first contract that was entered into for data collection commenced in 2014, and that was where surface waters and recharge was being examined, and that data is still being collected. So I don't know if we can even, geochemical, some of the existing pumping records, stream flow, water levels, aeromagnetics. This helps with the basement units of the model. Crop surveys help with the demands that are placed upon the water supplies in the area. So you can see it's a very extensive list that's required for groundwater modeling. Now, it's important to recall that this is an effort that includes 3 parties. I called them off already, so SRP, Town of Prescott Valley, and the city. Clear communication pathways need to be established and understood by the proposed modeling firm and by all those involved, actually. The selected firm for this groundwater flow model has demonstrated both verbally and in writing their understandings of communication requirements in order to maintain the integrity of the scientific work. So comprehensive agreement number 1 is among these parties. Those parties then selected a representative. So this breaks down to myself here at this point, John Munderloh with the Town of Prescott Valley, and Greg Kornrup. We're considered a steering committee. We meet on a regular basis, monthly, and are working on both the monitoring and the modeling aspects of this effort. These 2 parties, the town and the city, are represented further by Southwest Groundwater. Although we do have technical capabilities at the city, and Prescott Valley has their technical capabilities and their staff, this is very specialized. And so to meet the needs of this project, that's why we have Southwest Groundwater over here. Similar to Salt River Project, they have Leonard Rice Engineering representing them on the higher level technical matters. The modeling firm is this block right here, and so they'll be working with the support teams that include the Arizona Department of Water Resources, because they have a groundwater flow modeling, a hydrology department down there who's been very active in the past. They produce models for the active management area on a regular basis or do updates. USGS is another strong support team member. Not only are they doing some of the scientific data collection, but they also have expertise in modeling as well. And the last bit of this graph is just the administrative matters, so payments and such are handled by the city. So this is the model costs. The cost estimate for the model is approximately $1.1 million. This includes the optional tax tasks shown in the bottom half of the table. So these are listed as optional, but it was broken down in this matter to further address cost savings, where we could find cost savings in this effort. Most of the optional tasks will be performed due to their importance for a well-exercised first model. One that might not be is the training. Training aspects are related to when the model comes over to the city or is used in the future by the city's technical Southwest groundwater modeling firm, that we know exactly how everything was put together. We'll see if that's actually necessary. That might be a cost savings. But these other components are what really exercise the model. You build it, you exercise it, you see if it can tell you anything else about data gaps, things of that nature. And this is the last slide. It is a simplified version of the model schedule showing when activities will start and finish. Pending council approval of this prospective contract on February 28th, the parties to comprehensive agreement number 1 and the firm are ready to commence on March 8th, 2017, with a completion date of the model, the actual build, is December 2019. The associated report documenting all aspects of the model will be completed by May 20th at this point. So we've run a pretty tight schedule on this from the request for submittal of qualifications to this point now. The selected firm has been in step all the way, and we feel that we have a good firm to work with, a 3-party contract. The parties to the comprehensive agreement and the firm look forward to the upcoming council meeting on February 28th. The other representatives will be present, as well as the modeling firm. In your packet, it will include the full groundwater flow model proposal and the other items that support the prospective work. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, wake up, everybody.
Science.
I see a couple nodders out there. We go to Councilwoman Wilcox.
Leslie,
Yes, ma'am.
can you explain how the monitoring and the model will help us understand the difference between the impact of city pumping water out of the Big Chino versus the impact from individual groundwater wells that are already there or that may be put in the ground there?
I think that's a very good question, and I don't know if I have the technical expertise to actually separate that out for you as clearly as should be, probably, and in a limited amount of time. That has always been a question, and you can look at things. The model is going to place the pumping where it believes it's occurring, or where it understands it's occurring. So we understand it's occurring because we know there's private exempt wells out there. We know there's a water company out there. We know there's crop surveys that have shown what has been pumped in the past out there and what continues to be pumped. So those demand centers will be known within the model. When it's then run to see how it performs, then we might be able to piece that out. We'll see how the firm, the consulting firm, might address that question. If they can give us a distinct answer, I'll take that back so we have that ready for the next meeting on the 28th.
Oh,
See if they can give you more clear information than I could.
The reason I ask is that someone, and I'm sorry I forget who, actually a scientist, a knowledgeable person, told me that what the city would pump pales in comparison to the number of exempt wells and the impact that they are having on the Upper Verde watershed. I'd look forward to finding an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. And this is a tool that could be used.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilman Blair.
Leslie, there are, at this point in time, there's already some test wells and things that are going on out there right now, is there not?
Test wells in terms of pumping or water levels? Or?
Both, and stream levels, that whole...
Yes.
So with the stream gauges that are out there now and this comprehensive agreement that we have this time, am I to understand that we're going to have by 2020 a comprehensive model and look at everything we've been putting together? Is that the culmination of all these things?
Yes, sir. Yes. So the model actually brings it all. It will look at, as you're aware, there was some modeling done by the city
Right.
quite a while back, just for the upper portion of the basin. The USGS did a more regional groundwater flow model that was is first generation, so it covered a lot of ground and didn't actually have maybe as much data as it needed. So it was proposed even in 2007, that a nested groundwater model, just more saying it needed to be more refined, needed to be done. And so the data sets, I think is what you're asking, have been developed. So we're relying on everything that we can do or use from the time it started, that data collection, up till now. And then over time, people have learned that you need to piece in some more data acquisition in order to have a robust model.
Yeah, I think that the people out there may have been paying attention, and I've been involved with it since 1998. We've been talking about all these models forever, the nested piece here and the bird nest over here and all these different pieces that we have. USGS doing this piece, ADWR doing this piece, and all these things. So it's quite exciting as far as I'm concerned to not only look at the stream gauges, stormwater events, the actual pumping, the individual wells, and all this stuff coming together. And 2020 is what we've been waiting to see in this community, to see how growth will affect the future of Prescott and the region. So I'm looking forward to that.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. Leslie, the cost price list you had up there.
Yes, sir.
Is that Prescott's portion, or is that the entire?
That's the entire.
So that'll be split?
Yes, sir. So it's basically broken into thirds. And the funding plan for this is already in place with the comprehensive agreement that was approved in 2010, or 2013.
I could save all that money. Just go to your picture. We can use that picture. There's a lot of water under there, according to that picture. I mean, we're just right there. We're done.
Yeah. All right.
You want a paycheck?
Yeah, but we got to convince SRP. Councilwoman Orr.
Yeah, Leslie, this is exciting to know that we're getting to the point where we will know as far as the effect on the Verde, and then to know what we can do with the Big Chino, because that is the future of Prescott, and we know that we need that. So it's a good job. And the other I'd like to say, on Saturday, I went to CWAG, and you did an excellent presentation, so thank you. I know it's on their website, and Leslie just gave, in an hour, maybe it's an hour and 20 minutes, but it was an amazing presentation, so it's out there for everybody to see. And I think what it assured the people in the audience is that Prescott is watching the water. And so thank you for that. I know you put a lot of time into it.
Thank you, Councilman Orr.
Well, I tried to inject a little humor a few minutes ago, but this is a very serious and very technical subject. And I guess the only question I have is, by 2020, will we know the output, the entire report on this, or is that just when all the studies are done?
Well, I think with all scientific work, this is going to culminate into a report, and then it's going to be really looked at hard and see what it tells us. The comprehensive agreement number 1 speaks to rerunning this model every 3 years. So I won't. You can't say exactly what the world holds in 2020, but based on scientific experience that I've had, is that there will be more discussions, and but the goal would be to have a very robust model and know that it's well documented. The data sets are strong, or if they're not, that's okay too. You document it and say, this data set has some challenges, so we should be aware that this might be a range that we need to discuss in here versus knowing it's dead on. So I guess the best answer then is that we'll have to see what 2020 brings us, but all intents is to have a very strong groundwater flow model and then run it through its paces every 3 years.
So if I understand you correctly, we'll have the model, we'll have the reports of documentation giving us how we think things are going to move ahead. And then after that, SRP and everybody will start to look at it, and there may be a need for some additional testing or some additional questions to be answered. Is that correct?
That's a possibility, yes.
Okay. Councilman Blair?
Just real quick to finish up, as long as we're talking about it, I think that one thing that I probably have pulled together more on all these water meetings is the fact that it's never over. And the more testing you do and the more things that you continue to build a book, a portfolio, gives you more documentation and more information that you could actually have some pretty good certainty about what's happening underground. So I'm looking forward for this first nuance that we're coming up, but also look forward to the next 3 or 4 years after that of what those are telling us as well. So thank you for all that.
Thank you. And any other questions, comments from the council?
Yeah, I do,
Okay, go
Mayor.
ahead.
Thank you. Leslie? Is the end game on this to show the effect on the Verde River?
I think that's only one component. That was discussed within the comprehensive agreement number 1, was that, well, this is a long story. I guess I'm going to look over at Councilwoman Moore. Or, building the background and understanding for this. It will look at, will there be any impacts on the Verde? And that's important. That's part of the discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's not any more questions or comments, we'll move on to the last item.
Item D, legislative update.
In good shape.
I might just turn No, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tyler Goodman from the City Manager's Office. Unfortunately, it seems that every legislative update is negative in nature, just because of what the state's doing down there. But hopefully someday I can bring you a lot of good news in one sitting. But with that note, wanted to start with what Barry Aarons brought to us a couple weeks back regarding PSPRS. There really is no legislation right now in this session that is addressing the major flaws of PSPRS. But the PSPRS board has given a recommendation on risk pooling. I called Ken Strobeck from the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, and he gave me a little update on what was going on. And with the Cortex report that came out a few months ago, they gave recommendations on risk pooling and local board consolidation. So what the board right now is recommending is that the items outside of cities' control should be pooled. And those items would include longevity, death in the line of duty, termination, and disability. But then they would, on an individual basis, pool those other things that cities, or not, that cities can control: hiring practice, age at entry, workforce reduction, compensation, those types of things. So that's considered the hybrid approach. Now, the league was opposed to this. They would like to see it fully risk pooled, all those items together. And that was the recommendation, but the board didn't take it. The league has also brought up the idea of pooling larger cities rather than combining all large, medium, and small. The board also did not take that. But Ken Strobeck is a member of the newly created advisory committee, which is reporting to the PSPRS board, and they're going to be giving a recommendation on local board consolidation. So it's kind of a work in progress, but I wanted to give you an update on that. That's the general direction that they're going at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. The consolidation, is that an administrative adjustment, or does that have to go back to the voters of Arizona?
That would be administrative.
Okay.
Yep. And that's, for Tier 3 moving forward. It wouldn't be, this is all for Tier 3, nothing retroactively.
Excuse me, Tyler.
Tyler,
Yeah.
before you go on, so when you're saying pooling, that's statewide, and then the other option is maybe they put, I heard like 7 cities, they might take out like the large cities.
Right.
Pull those together. It seems to me, and I haven't read that whole report yet, but it seems to me that they're having less problems than the smaller communities. It's the smaller communities like Prescott that are having more difficult times maintaining the system. So it seems, I don't know if we can have any input on that or not, but it would seem that pulling everything together. I understand the taking out the things that we don't have control of, and but I think for us to say, let's let Phoenix and some of the big cities, because they're hiring people, they're growing. It's the smaller cities that are having hard times. So I don't know if we have input on that, or Mayor, you're on that board.
Yeah, we're looking at it, and I think most of the mayors I've talked to want to see stratification, probably Phoenix by itself, the greater Phoenix area, Tucson being in a category by itself, then smaller cities like us, Flagstaff, and then real small towns like Chino. So it'd be about 4 stratifications, and
Well, I hope
it'd be
they run
very
models
similar
on
size.
that and run it out to 50, 100 years, because, you know, I think one of the biggest problems we have with PSPRS is the fact that there are 256 entities.
Right.
And they each have their own risk pool. And that, you know, nobody looked at that maybe back in, when was that, 1967?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 68.
68?
Yeah.
Okay. I still need that slide.
So what did they say about the local boards? I didn't quite understand.
Local boards is currently being discussed. They have an advisory committee on which Ken Strobeck from the league sits.
Okay.
And so they're actually meeting as we speak for the first time in order to find some recommendations to give to the board. But the idea, there's some combinations that what you can do there, either not consolidate at all, do a hybrid approach, or completely consolidate with one board that would meet in Phoenix, for example. So
Yeah, the
there's
one
some
I heard
options.
was one single board, then having regional boards, or then keeping it totally at the local level.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And I think, Mayor, you know, the reason for the local boards is because they're all separate funds.
Yeah.
And that's why you have 2 boards really here. So I think my understanding as part of the discussion is as you create these groups, I don't know, not tiers, but create these different groups, that those groups would then have boards to determine membership eligibility, those kinds of things for each group. So if there are 4 or 5 groups within that tier 3, you may have 4 or 5 boards to match each of those groups. The other thing I want to comment on, I talked to somebody yesterday, City of Phoenix, and their unfunded liability number they're expecting huge growth because they're expecting a lot of retirees, because they had a lot of people, you know, baby boomers and whatever post baby boomers are called, Gen X's, you know, they're getting on the verge of retirement. And so when as Phoenix and some of the bigger cities grew and really added a lot of police officers, they're all on the verge now of retiring. So they're seeing our numbers, not really experiencing what we're experiencing currently, but expecting that experience to happen in the near future. So it may not, it works both ways, yeah. So those are the things you have to look at down the road.
And one thing that's happening in Phoenix, when I was talking to them, they're almost 700 officers down. They haven't hired against 700 officer positions. And so if they're worried that they're now coming up to that point of, you know, fairly high retirement rate, and then if they lose a lot of people in retirement and they still haven't, you know, reconstituted those 700, 800 positions, they're going to have a major catch-up, and it's going to be a major expense, yeah.
Okay. The next item is, I know we've discussed budget amendments for hotshot members who are added to PSPRS, some posthumously, as well as family members and others. Currently, we're receiving $1 million a year from the state for the 6 members, I believe, that have been added. There are expected to be more added, 5 or 6 more. We were working with Senator Fan this year in order to think about a budget amendment in order to extend that, maybe $1 million a year going forward in order to cover those costs. She recommended, as well as discussing with Barry Aarons, that we hold off, and we were in discussions with Mark as well, because PSPRS will be updating our actuarials this year, which will shift that number around. There's a few other factors as well with, as well as the Hall case. Those decisions that are going to be made. So it's a moving target, and Senator Fan thought it more prudent, because this goes until 2019. Let's get as close as we can, let's get as accurate as we can, run it again next year, and have that going forward.
Because my understanding is, if we're going to go back to the well on this particular instance, we should have that number.
As
so
close.
when we do our ask, they say in fundraising, that we have the right number.
Right. We're not going to be able to go back a third, a fourth time, so getting it right was the good idea there.
And again, they only got in 2016 0.6%. They didn't even make 1%. So as they smooth that out in the future, there'll be additional costs that we have to worry about.
Yes, good point. The next one, Senate Bill 1165. This is the bill that we ran with Senator Fan. It includes the exempt well, requiring 3 bids in order to have an exempt well. There was some opposition that came out against this, and discussing with Barry and Senator Fan, we found it prudent to work with these folks in the interim in order to smooth that out and run it again next year. And that's kind of just part of the process. You bring a bill out the first year, it gets opposition, you find out what it is, you work with them, you change it, and run it again to make it pass.
Tyler, what would be the effect of the 3-bid process?
So right now, as far as I understand it, in order to dig an exempt well, since we're the assured water provider, a person only has to get 1 bid showing that it's cheaper to drill that well rather than connecting to the city line. So what we'd want to do, and there was stricter legislation run years ago that completely tanked. And so Senator Fan only would run this because it had a chance of passing. And so what this would do would require 3 bids, take the average of those 3 bids. If that number is cheaper than connecting to the city, then please go ahead and do it. It's to cut out the artificially low bids that we believe were coming in.
And just by a little bit of background, we suspect that it's possible that some well drillers would give a artificially low bid that to get the exemption, and then that's not the real price. Not alleging that anybody actually did that, but that's sort of a suspicion. So by getting 3 bids and sort of averaging those, you tend to, moderate it a little bit more to a more realistic number. I think that's the idea. It's not preventing private wells, even where they have water. It's just simply getting a more real number from that. Now, I think the other thing we can do locally, by the way, or might be able to locally, we can look into, is when subdivision plats are approved, is prohibited in that platting any private wells on those. But that's all. But a lot of this is happening on plats that are been in existence for years, so we can't go back and change those. So we can kind of prevent those going forward when we're doing platting, because we're providing water to all the new subdivision plats that we're doing. So we can prevent those going forward, just not historically.
So if in fact it would be cheaper how would you determine whether it would be cheaper to hook up to the city? I mean,
you look at the cost of running the lateral line, and you look at the cost of the impact fees that you'd have to pay to hook into the city system.
Well, if it's cheaper to hook up to the city, then...
No, it's the other way around. If it's cheaper to drill a well, then they're allowed to do their own private well on a lot.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make sure that the less expensive route is truly a real number, or a more accurate number, versus what may be sort of a fake number, shenanigans.
Yeah, my discussions at the state also indicated that if we were looking at this on a statewide basis, there was no chance it was going to pass. If it looked at a very finite area, maybe the RAMA or something like that, it had a much better chance of passing.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point, and that's what Barry brought up. So we're going to make some changes to it and run it again and work with those folks who've come out to get that through.
So the goal here is that people aren't drilling wells
when they have the
when they
ability
have
to get
access
connected
to
the city. Right. That's correct.
Because they're pulling out the same aquifer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it's not managed at all.
I know. Yeah. You don't even know what they're doing. Yeah. And then we can reclaim it. Yeah.
Yeah. The next one on my list, construction sales tax. I know this is a big one. A bill was dropped, HB 2521. It's going to be heard tomorrow in House Ways and Means for the first time. That's the first committee it's going to be in. What's interesting is the way that they're changing this, or proposing to change it, it would create a redistribution using a pool of 4% of the total retail city transaction privilege tax or sales tax. That gets distributed back based on the value of building permits. So if you have a slower growth city, you're going to be losing money. Now, this is the kicker, is the league has estimated that even the state would lose $150 million a year in revenue on this, and that cities would be combined 120 to 140 million on this. So there is some opposition, obviously, because of that. As far as I understand, even the governor doesn't like this version of it. It's not believed that it will pass because of that. The league is opposed. We've put in our voice of opposition to it as well. It's just a bad precedent to set. So
who's pushing that bill?
This is being run by Representative Cobb, and I don't know where Representative Cobb is from.
Tex.
From under a rock.
Right.
Didn't the state just like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, passed something that nobody understood. And it took them a year to figure out that they didn't understand it, and we still don't understand it. Is this part of that?
I don't know. Mark, do you know?
Yeah, this is an extension of that. When that came around, this was the goal, is to move all construction sales tax to the point of sale of retail.
And that's new construction, because the way
that includes new construction. Back a few years ago, as you point out,
they separated it.
They separated out the incidental constructions, the plumbers, the painters, and those things.
Because like myself, I just do remodels. So I don't do new construction, so I can take off my sales tax at the point of sale, and I don't need to file it with the state. So this still has to do with new sales.
This is extending that methodology to new construction.
Okay.
Have you gotten your business license yet? No.
You mean answer that publicly?
That's a separate issue.
And let me just comment on that too. In discussions with the mayors just the other day on this, I think just about every mayor was totally against this bill, and everybody has agreed to get a hold of their representatives and senators and convince them to defeat this bill. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's not believed that it'll pass, but we'll keep an eye on it. I'll let you know. Consolidated election dates. This is HB 2495. Now, don't let this give you a heart attack. If this bill would pass, and it's going to be heard for the first time tomorrow. Again, there's a lot of activity now because it's the last week for bills to be heard in their chamber of origin, so there's just a flurry of activity. But if this was to pass, the city could only hold an election to raise transaction privilege tax, sales tax on even-numbered years. Now, in the fall of even-numbered years,
these people are sick.
Right? Talk to Barry. He said this should not apply to something that the council, for example, the August 29th ballot, it wouldn't apply to that. He's going to go to this committee hearing. We've already tried to put that out there that this is not good. It should not pass. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
Is this the one that prevents contracting with the county, or is it just an outright?
This is a different one. So that's another one on the list. Another one on the list, since John mentioned it, it would only allow us to contract with the county to do elections on even-numbered years, except for a recall and another
Can you remind Barry that the last time they tried this, the charter cities got together and sued the state and won? Just, I mean, maybe he needs to know that.
This is their end run around that decision.
Right.
And, you know, it's just bizarre to me because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
The difference is the two cities that took the lead, Phoenix and Tucson, do run their own elections. So this particular bill wouldn't affect them. And, you know, cynically, I think that's the reason they picked that one, because they know that other charter cities like Douglas, Winslow, Prescott, Glendale, Mesa don't run their own elections. They contract with the county.
But how does that benefit anybody to write a bill that makes 0 sense?
Yeah. Again, the theory, I'm not supporting this obviously, but the theory is that there's a higher turnout during even-numbered years in the fall, which is, you know, the statewide general election, and then every 4 years the presidential election. But again, the cynic says this is perfectly partisan because, you know, that's when Republicans and Democrats show up to vote, because all those other elections are partisan and city elections aren't, and they're intentionally not, other than in Tucson. Every other municipal election in the state is nonpartisan. It's not party affiliated. So that's I think that's their reasoning, is they want partisan elections even when they aren't partisan races. So.
Tyler, who's sponsoring that bill of consolidation?
That one is, it's Representative Payne and Ugenti Rita, and she's a very common factor with many of these bills.
And by the way, Cobb's from Mojave County, Kingman area. I don't know if that explains anything or not. You'll have to explain what that means.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, the next one on the list is HB 2213, which is GPLET reform, government property lease excise tax. It's an economic development tool that cities can use. They're trying to get rid of it. So the league is very aware of this, trying to stop it as well. We're just keeping track of this one. Right now, it did pass through committee, and it passed through rules, and now it's on the committee of the whole agenda. So it will probably be heard this week, but we're keeping tabs on that one as well. but we put in a voice of opposition again on that. John supplied a good comment, a statement for Bear to use. So,
Well, I can tell you that the mayors I talked to down there, particularly from the big cities, they use GPLET as a significant tool for economic development. It's been very important for bringing in a lot of businesses, and they're totally against it. And with the new language in it, it's going to be so restrictive that I don't think we'd ever be able to use it here, and it would very much curtail what they're trying to do in the big cities too. Yeah.
Okay. The next one, Barry mentioned this one, HB 2179, which has to do with intergovernmental agreements, again by Ugenti Rita. This one will require us to review our intergovernmental agreements every 8 years. It would just, I mean, for no reason, it would just add a huge burden onto staff to review these for really no good reason except to review them. So again, we're working against that one. The league sent out a message today. They're actually tallying votes in the committee where it's going to be heard to voice opposition and to get that stopped as well. So
Originally, that one actually got better. Originally, it was that city agreements could only go for 8 years and no longer, which is completely nonsense in terms of any long-term agreements, leases. And then it was reduced back to intergovernmental agreements could only go for 8 years. But again, some of those sometimes that just doesn't make sense. And apparently the reason for this was that she was looking for, this particular representative was looking for an agreement between, I want to say Phoenix or somebody, and the Maricopa County Elections Office, and couldn't find it. And so based on that personal experience, decided that's what the necessity for this bill was. So right now, in its current form, all it does is it adds administrative burden to the clerk's office and the attorney's office to review all of the IGAs and write a report on it, and then every 8 years have to repeat that or something. So it seems unnecessary.
Not to disparage the legislature, but I will tell you, that what I was told down there is that most of these legislative bills that come forward are individual personal experiences and issues that they have, and so they bring a bill forward to try and resolve it or contest it or something.
Okay.
Sledgehammer and fly thinking.
Only two more. SB 1329 has to do with fire flow requirements. I've worked with Chief Light and Don Devendorf on this. It's a really bad bill, another one. What it would do is, there's kind of a theme going on. City code for fire protection would not apply to, let me get this straight here, single-family residential properties or single-family subdivisions with individual dimensions equal to or greater than 1/2 acre if the city's source of water provided there doesn't meet the requirements of 1,000 gallons per minute for fire flow in order to abate fires. So if we're at 999 gallons a minute, they would not have to put in the infrastructure in order to provide that. Obviously, it's a terrible bill. There is a ton of opposition. It actually did make it through one committee.
Is this those same two people with a bad experience with the fire?
This is Senator Allen. So, speaking with Chief, we believe that if it goes any further than this, it'll just end up being a lot of people down at the legislature saying how crazy that would be to do that.
I think the only what the mayor was talking about is actually, it's not just the legislator, it's oftentimes a business or a trade organization that has a bad experience with one municipality, and then there has to be the sweeping bill to correct the problem, quote unquote, across the state when some business or some trade industry or some legislator had a bad experience with the municipality. That tends to be the trend here in the last, say, 10 years in the legislature, and that's why you see a lot of these anti-city bills. It's because the organizations or businesses or legislators don't like something that happened at a city.
What about
what we call special interest bills.
Yeah.
What about all the bad experiences we have with them? I think we need to start drafting some bills.
We can work on
that.
Yeah,
let's go to the last one here.
All right, the last one is SB 1247. This has to do with conservation easements. This would require that any conservation easements that we hold, which from Joe Baines I heard we have about 25 acres of conservation easements, that we'd be required to make an annual payment in lieu of property taxes. So basically as if a private entity was holding that, and it would be retroactive. So So we would be paying, I don't even have an estimate of what that would be, but it would probably be very high. So that, on that happy note, again, we're fighting that one as well. So,
Any questions, comments on Councilwoman Orr?
So Tyler, can you bring us up to date on the bill with Noah Campbell's sober home and the broker not allowing? Noah Campbell's bill that he introduced, I think it's 2333.
Yeah, it was, Farnsworth held it. It was never read in committee, so it never got out of it.
I looked at it online. I couldn't figure it out, so
But,
it was never heard.
You can go ahead and explain what Barry was trying to do.
well, that one I'm actually not aware of.
What he's trying to do, he's trying to attach it to another bill, more neutral bill, as an amendment, so we can kind of continue to move it forward. Farnsworth was totally against it. We don't know why he was against it. But I can tell you, as around a lot of the recovery industry would like to get away from brokering, particularly they don't get the interest or the insurance that they used to get. So
Right.
they were in support of his bill. So I don't know why Farnsworth didn't want to go forward.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll put that on the radar too, just to ask him and maybe Barry what we can do to help, if anything.
Or down the road,
Yeah, down the road next year probably.
done now.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
One thing I'd like to see on the list, and I know this is late in the game, maybe you could talk to Barry about this, is the idea of expanding the uses of the bed tax and the bed board and booze tax so that we might have the opportunity in the future to use those taxes for general municipal purposes, including public safety.
Right, the things that would impact what we're promoting.
Yeah, when tourists come here, they do have an impact on our other services, library, police, fire, so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can look into that with him.
Thank you.
I would just say, as a practical reality, that's sort of next year's legislative
Probably
agenda,
is,
just
yes.
so you know.
Yeah, but maybe there's a striker amendment
Yeah.
opportunity.
We love those.
Okay, we got a couple minutes here if anybody from the public would like to comment on what we have right now in the way of legislative update. Okay, if there's nothing else from the council, this meeting's adjourned. We'll reconvene in about 10 minutes.